Yo people, welcome to the video. How are we doing? So today I just wanted to have a casual sit down and talk through some of the books that I've personally found most useful and most helpful when it comes to both understanding personal finance in the first place and then also in kind of helping me to create my own personal finance plan, if you will. Now, before I dive straight into the books and talk about each one of them a little bit, I just want to make one quick point, and I will be as quick as I can. So there is nothing inherently special about the information that you read in a book that necessarily makes it any better, any more true, or any more valuable than information you get from a multitude of other sources, right? In fact, information, regardless of where it's from, be it from a person, a YouTube video, or a book, should just be judged solely on the merit of that individual piece of information, right? And in fact, often things like YouTube videos can be a better source of information, and that's because in creating a YouTube video, creators are, in a sense, forced to make them direct and to the point and digestible so that viewers keep their attention and so that they feel like it was a valuable use of their time, and then they come back and watch another video, right? Now, if you think about a book, often it works the other way around, because an author might have some great ideas and some great information that he or she wants to get out there, but it might only amount to 5 or 10 pages, which is often the case. But you can't sell 5 or 10 pages as a book, right? It needs to be 200 pages. And so often what you find is there are nuggets of information, but they are buried within pages and pages of fairly irrelevant anecdotes and other bits of information that you don't really care about. And why am I saying this, right? I'm saying this because I think we have a recent infatuation, if you will, with the actual act of reading itself. Maybe it's Ty Lopez's fault, right? But it's not the reading that is the cool thing, right? It's the act of, taking a proactive approach to learning and a proactive approach to expanding your mental horizons and increasing your knowledge base, right? That is the cool thing, isn't it? And so although I'm going to go through some books now, I just don't want to give off the impression that books are the only good or valid source of information, right? In fact, most things that you could ever hope to learn about, you can learn everything there is to know for free on the internet, whether it's through newsletters or people's blog posts or YouTube videos or any other way. So let's just do it. So I'm actually going to give you these in the rough order that I would recommend reading them. Some of the later ones won't really make a difference, but at least with this first few, I'm going to do that. So the first one I would recommend is called Money, a User's Guide by a girl called Laura Waitley. Now, I never heard anyone even mention this one before. Probably it's just not one of the cool ones, is it? It's not Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? But it's just full of practical information. And if you're a complete noob, you know nothing about money and the world of finance and personal finance, this will give you the basic information, right, without confusing you with all the crazy terminology. Because what you'll find in a lot of personal finance books is they define terms using other terms that you don't know the definition of, so then you can't really get that full definition, and you go to the definition of that one, it's got a term that you don't understand, and you just go round in circles because it's a completely different world of language, and this is just straight up to the point. It's inoffensive, it's not daunting whatsoever. So I'm just going to read you some of the titles, the subheadings from the contents page, just so you get an idea of the actual contents of it, right? The housing crisis and how to rent well, how to buy a home, the debt you're in, how to handle it, how to budget, where to save, how to invest in the stock market, everything you need to know about pensions, everything you need to know about tax, understanding your bills and insurance, money and love, money and well-being, ethical finance. So that pretty much covers the building blocks for an understanding in personal finance. I don't think I've got much more to say about that one. That is number one, right? So number two, Reset, how to restart your life and get FU money. Now, before, when I talked about books that have a lot of unnecessary information in them, this is one of them. So the first 116 pages of this, I would just skip altogether, right? Because if you want to read it, fine, but a lot of it's quite like self-helpy and stuff like that, and I'm not particularly, that's not why I picked up this book, do you know what I mean? I don't pick up a book with a big yellow horrible cover and a power on button to get inspired about life, right? Because I'll do that through other means, do you know what I mean? I would skip straight to the actual information, which starts in part 4, getting FU money, a plan. So this guy actually caters a lot to, well, you feel like he's talking to an older generation than me anyway, maybe like 40-year-olds or people like partway through a kind of professional life, and I guess that's where the title comes from, Reset, right? But he talks a lot about the things encapsulated in the FIRE movement. So if you haven't heard of that, it's financial independence, retire early. So it's these people who basically they gear their whole career and adult life towards obtaining this early retirement through just heavily saving, you know, a high proportion of their income, and doing everything they can to just put their money away into pensions and investments and stuff so that they can basically retire as soon as they possibly can right now. If that sounds good to you, great. Personally, I don't want to retire ever, but it's still useful to get this information. Now, he talks about a lot of the stuff from the first book, but in a little bit more depth. So he talks more about actual investments, whether it's SIPs, so self-invested personal pensions, ISAs, index funds. He actually goes into the breakdown of the index funds that he's invested in. I actually copied this exactly when I first put money into index funds, right? So it's just a good informative look at a lot of those things. So let me just give you a couple of the subheadings. There is Stash Maths, which talks about kind of how much you need in your pension. It talks about stuff like drawdown rates, and it's actually quite shocking when you calculate how much you need in a pension to retire. It's a lot, mate. That's a little clue there. Budgeting, efficiency and frugality, investing, net worth, all this kind of stuff. Like he talks about what to do if you are in a job and you have a company contribution pension, loads of different stuff like that. So that would be number 2, but as I say, skip the first half of it. So the third one I want to talk about is called How to Own the World by a guy called Andrew Craig. Now that is the third of 3. These are all so far UK centric and focused on the kind of UK individual, because I wanted to include those really because a lot of the content and books out there are focused more towards a kind of US market. So How to Own the World, it's more about investing, this one. So again, it's a nice stepping stone from these, right? Because this is just basics of finance, some kind of introduction to investing in terms of index funds and stuff like that. And then How to Own the World is a kind of a slightly deeper look, but still a kind of broad basics on investing on the whole. So the title, How to Own the World, it comes from the idea that you should be diversified. You've probably heard that term. So that your assets, things that you own, are spread into all these different types of asset classes. So you basically own bits of everything, right? And then as the world grows and there are kind of bull markets and bear markets, or like, you know, things going up and down, and also inflation generally, you own that inflation, right? Because if, you know, the price of gold goes up and you own gold instead of having cash sat there, then your net worth goes up with the gold, right? Now that could be true of anything. It could be true of fake plants, right? If I own a load of fake plants and then fake plants get really expensive, then my net worth has gone up. Whereas if I just have the money and then everything else gets more expensive, then my net worth relative to my purchasing power, what I can do with that net worth, has gone down. So the book in general, that's the kind of basic theme of it, but it gives you a good introduction into all the different types of asset classes. Now, I find that one of the most difficult things for me when I first started learning about investing was understanding the different types of asset classes, because as I said before, a lot of the terminology, they kind of define each one using the other. So you might see a definition for, you know, securities, and it might say, oh, examples are stocks and shares and something else. And then you might go on the definition for a stocks and share and it say it's a type of security, and you're like, right, I haven't got any further here. And so I think this book just gives you a good introduction, a nice, clear, concise, easy to understand kind of core fundamental basis of knowledge on kind of different types of asset classes and how best to approach investing. It also gives you some detail on kind of what to do. There's a section at the end where it talks about the set and forget method, which is a kind of low maintenance investing option. And then there's the, what's it called? I think it's taking it further, which sounds like a euphemism at a fucking party, right? There's the taking it further approach to investing, which he goes into as well. So that's another one. I'd get an Audible and just give it a listen if you want, or whatever. All right, so the fourth book is not a single book, but more a kind of genre or type of book. I'll give you some examples. So we've got a Richard Branson autobiography there. We've got another Richard Branson book. We also got Sam Walton, Made in America. So Sam Walton is the guy who founded Walmart, so the Waltons now one of the richest families ever. I also enjoyed Alan Sugar's autobiography, and Duncan Bannatyne's is quite a good, interesting read as well. Now, although all of these are, or most of them are autobiographical in nature, so they're not necessarily geared towards helping you understand personal finance, right? And they probably won't teach you that much on that front. However, financial well-being and achieving that, there's two sides to that equation. There's being good with your money and understanding how it all works so you can get the most out of it, both saving and investing wise. And then there is just making money, right? And one without the other won't get you there. You won't achieve that financial stability without both sides of that equation. And so you could be the best person in the world at budgeting, but if you just don't earn enough money, then you're still not going to achieve that kind of financial well-being, and vice versa. You could earn loads and be terrible with it, and you're still going to have a life that involves some kind of finance-related stress, right? And so I think these are a really good insight, a really good look into the minds of people who are just motivated, like go-getters. These kind of young, they were young when they started the autobiographies, obviously. These entrepreneurs that just go get stuff done, right? And they just like, they're super proactive about stuff. And I think a lot of the content on YouTube, personal finance-wise, these first few books that I've mentioned, they're more towards the side of like just being good with your money, because it's easier for me to make a video saying, oh, this is how you can save some money, this is how you can make more out of the money that you've got, right? Because everyone can relate to that, probably everyone's gonna watch it, right? But people don't like to be told, just make more money, man. Because like, obviously for some people, that's not, now for most people that it's possible, right? But for some people, like they're not in situations where it's immediately possible for them to progress career-wise or finance-wise, right? For some people. And so like, it's offensive to tell people to make more money for some reason, right? That's a bad thing, right? And nobody wants to be offensive when they're making YouTube videos, so they don't say it, right? But I think there's an important side of the equation, and that's why I would suggest reading some of these books, because it is quite motivating. It just gives you an idea of like what it takes, do you know what I mean? So you don't have to like these individuals. Some of them are quite controversial. You don't have to like them on a personal level, but you certainly have to respect what they've done. So yeah, I feel like I got a lot of value out of these books. So the fifth one I'm going to talk about briefly is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Now, I'm sure you've heard of this book before. It's super popular. Probably not in relation to finance, right? Because it's not a personal finance book. It doesn't really talk about money so much or investing or anything like that. Now, it's more about the psychology of the decisions we make and the types of decision-making processes that go on in our heads when we're faced with choices. And so it talks a bit about the kind of rationality and potential irrationality that comes into play with various kind of biases that we have and things that contribute to both good and bad decisions on our part, right? So it's very into the kind of psychological workings. And I think that's important because when it comes to money, a lot of decisions are made emotionally that shouldn't be. Now, I'm not saying you should never make an emotional financial decision, right? Maybe you want to treat yourself and buy something one day and it's just like, you know, and it's worth it, you know, but maybe it's not, right? A lot of kind of purchases, people buy stuff emotionally, people invest emotionally, they buy and sell stocks emotionally, you know, and a lot of these decisions should be, you know, or at least would benefit from being much more rational and thought out. And so I think this is a good guide for at least kind of having an objective view of your subjectiveness, if that makes sense. So for rationality and reason, I would suggest that book. All right, before I go, I just want to quickly mention another two books that I'm not actually recommending, but I just want to give my opinion on them briefly, because if you've watched other videos like this, you've probably been told to go and read them right now. The first one is Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. That's probably the most popular personal finance book in history, right? Or at least one of them, right? It's very close. It might actually be the next one that I'm going to mention. Before you go and purchase this or read it, I would at least suggest watching an animated book review, or at least listening to the 5-minute free sample that you can get on Audible, because I feel like once you've had 5 or 10 minutes of it, you've pretty much had it all. It is more of the same. It's just example after example of these kind of financial scenarios where someone makes a good decision, someone makes a bad decision. Often it's fairly common sense. At least if you understand everything from the other books, then you would make those decisions yourself, right? But it's put forward in a way that makes it sound much more profound than it truly is. At least that's what I think now. It's super popular. I expect I'll get some flack for that. Now, you are free to, you know, disagree with me. That's fine. Now, the second one I want to mention is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. This was written like maybe like a century ago or something like that, right? And you'll know, tell you what, if you actually listen to this one or a few of the older investment ones on Audible, they sound like they're narrated by like one of the founding fathers. Like, it literally sounds that old. That's just besides the point now. I didn't particularly rate Think and Grow Rich either. I think it's super popular partly because of the title, because Think and Grow Rich sounds really nice. I can just think and I'll grow rich, right? It's like the, you know, old version of The Secret. Do you know what I mean? It's not as bad as The Secret. It's not. I'm not only in title, right? I'm sure it's got some good stuff in it. I personally didn't find it that valuable. I just found it super like abstract. Like, I'll read you some of the titles of the contents page. So we've got Power of the Mastermind, The Mystery of Sex, The Subconscious Mind, The Brain, The Sixth Sense, How to Outwit the Six Ghosts of Fear. So I think that's just a book that people read when they're trying to be cool, man. I don't know, maybe, again, you can agree with me if you want, but that's just my 2 cents. I personally don't think either of those books were particularly practical, but, you know. Right, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you got some value from it. If you do end up reading any of these books, or if you've got your own suggestions, in fact, put them down below, because, you know, I'm ready to expand my horizons. I want to read more of, you know, these kind of books anyway, so let me know. See you later. Subscribe, like my stuff, you know, say hi to my plant. See you in a bit.